What is up guys, Morton here from SteamFirst.com with a review for BlazeRush, a racing game developed by Targum Games and released October 28, 2014 on Steam for $10. BlazeRush is a top-down racing game with a few race types, a lot of weapons, many different cars that all handle differently, and a good variety in tracks. The gameplay is very fun, but there are definitely some flaws, though I wouldn't say they completely ruin the experience. Most of the time when you're racing, it's just a straight race to complete 3 laps, and whoever crosses the finish line first wins. There are weapons along the way, guns or rockets that can knock other cars off the track. There's also boosts that give you either a small speed boost for a long time or a massive speed boost for a short time. For the most part, these races are fun, but they do have one massive problem, which is that the first 2 laps mean absolutely nothing. What I mean by that is there's a pretty absurd catch-up mechanic, where if you fall too far behind, the game just moves you forward. This means that you can actually start a race and not press any buttons for the first 2 laps, and still win the race, because the game will continue to move you forward every time you fall behind. So you'll never be more than a second or 2 behind the rest of the people. This is nice in the fact that crashing once doesn't mean you lose automatically, but it also makes it boring knowing that the first 2 laps mean absolutely nothing. Not all game types have this problem though. One of the races has a spiked steamroller chasing you, and the objective is to outlive your opponents. Once someone dies, the remaining racers all get 1 point, and once 4 of the 5 people are dead, everyone respawns, and it goes again until someone reaches 15 points. So if you don't play from the beginning here, you'll lose, which is a much better system. There's also all the same weapons and boosts in this game mode, so not only are you trying to avoid being run over, you also need to avoid getting killed by other racers. Another game mode is King of the Hill. How that works is that whoever is in first place gets 1 point per second, and it's a race to 50 points. This game type has its own problems as well, mainly that sometimes a computer will get in first and you literally can't catch up. They don't make any mistakes, and if other computers get in your way, it can be impossible to hit the first place driver with any weapons, meaning you can't possibly catch up to them. There were a few times where somebody will win with 50 points and all the other drivers have 0. It's worth noting that this can happen in your favor too, where you can get out in front and all the computer players will just destroy each other, leaving you to win without any competition. As for the tracks, they're pretty well designed, but they're all kind of samey. For the most part, they're all just squares, and some of the levels you just play in reverse, so it's the same, you just go the other way around. They're different enough to not get boring quickly, but after a while they do start to feel repetitive, especially if you get stuck in a certain section for a long period of time. While the single player is a lot of fun and it's challenging and varied enough to be entertaining for quite a while, the multiplayer is pretty much non-existent. I actually think this game would have great multiplayer. It's 8 players and the game lends itself nicely to it with all the weapons. Unfortunately, nobody plays it. I tried it at all times of the day multiple times and never found more than 1 other person. When I did play against that one person, it was incredibly laggy, which might be why nobody plays it. The only other thing worth mentioning for gameplay is that it supports the Oculus Rift. Now I don't own an Oculus Rift, so I have absolutely no idea if it works well or not, but I did think it was worth mentioning because it is a cool feature. Overall, the gameplay gets a 4 out of 5. Even though the multiplayer is a mess, the single player is still really enjoyable. Even though almost half the races can be won even if you ignore the first 2 laps, it's still difficult enough that it will keep you engaged. Plus, unlocking new cars and playing the different tracks is very fun too. Graphically, the game looks pretty good. All the cars are different and easily recognizable, which is very important when they all react so differently to being hit or shot at. Even though the track design is similar throughout the game, they do look different visually, and they're really well done too. The colors are vivid and the backgrounds are nice as well. The only complaint is some of the levels are dark, so dark you can't even really see, and I think they did this on purpose to make it difficult, but it just makes it less fun when you can't really tell what's going on. Graphics get a 4.5 out of 5. Like the graphics, the audio is also really good. The soundtrack is fantastic, it's fast paced and fun, and it fits the feel of the game really well. As for the weapons, they're all good, but they aren't great. Some of the weapons, the saw blade for example, have a sound that's kind of silly almost. It's not bad though, and the soundtrack makes up for it. Sound gets a 4 out of 5. There's also a ton of replayability with this game. Even though the multiplayer is kind of non-existent, the single player gives a lot of reasons to go back and keep playing. Each level has trophies you get for doing different things, like winning or destroying 3 people in one race or something, so you can go back to try to get all the trophies, which shouldn't take up a significant amount of time, since you'll most likely have to try different cars to figure out which ones are best for each race. There's also a fair amount of achievements, most of which you'll get just by playing through once, but there are some you'll need to go back and put effort into. Replayability gets a 4 out of 5. Even without the multiplayer, there's still a lot to go back and complete. Overall, BlazeRush is a really fun racer that has a fair amount of variety in the races while looking and sounding great as well. For $10, you'll get quite a few hours of entertainment, and that's just playing through the single player once. If you replay races to collect the trophies and unlock all the cars, or if the multiplayer ever picks up, you can get even more hours out of it. And most importantly, the game is fun. It's fast-paced, chaotic, and enjoyable. BlazeRush gets a 4 out of 5. The only two complaints are the lack of active multiplayer and the fact that the first 2 laps of races don't really matter at all, but those are small complaints compared to the rest of the game, especially since the other 2 race types don't have that problem.